Incredibly warm welcome here to Miran and Omar, who are joining us today. So yeah, we are day one. I don't know about anyone else. I'm day one of the Easter holidays. So I was just mentioning I've already dropped my son at Gatwick Airport and taken Rosabella for a ride. So I feel like I've achieved an awful lot, and it's only midday. But I'm really pleased to have, as I say, Miran and Omar. These are two people that I have met. They are incredible people in what they are achieving. And I am very fortunate to be mentoring them all around serviced accommodation and rent to rent and property investing. So I absolutely love, and I feel so fortunate to be able to help people do the things that, one, I love doing because I absolutely love property, but two, another element of my life that has been the same for a very long time is I love helping people. So I can even remember as a teenager in the pub sort of helping, you know, talk about certain things. And yeah, it's always been something that I've really enjoyed. And I'm fortunate that I've got a little bit of a propensity to be able to help people on their way. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk through the journey so far with Miran and Omar, and what tends to happen in property, and I don't know if anyone else has noticed this, but we tend to see the people perhaps at the pinnacle of their career. They might have millions of pounds worth of property in their portfolio, or they might have 40 rent-to-rent SA units, and you're there thinking, well, that's nice, but I'm starting here. And they're right the way over there. And sometimes we need to see people who are just a few steps ahead of us. And that's why I really want these guys to share their journey, because I know that they will really inspire anyone else who's pretty new to property and pretty new to this area, to give them inspiration as well. So let's just do a really brief intro. Let's start with Miran. If you could just let us know kind of where you're based, perhaps an age bracket. I don't expect you necessarily to say your exact age, but in an age bracket, and whether you currently have a job, and why you have chosen to start working in property.
Sure. Yep. So my name's Miran. I'm based in West London. I am in my late 20s. Currently where I'm at my property journey. So having previously bought a buy-to-let, which has been great. I'm currently on the hunt for my first rent-to-rent. Reaching out to landlords, reaching out to estate agents, you're going to receive a lot of no's. However, I honestly think that property is all about mindset. You know, it's inevitable. You're going to encounter obstacles along the way. It's how you deal with those obstacles. So that's currently where I'm at.
Fantastic. Really exciting. Okay, Omar, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Emma. So yes, I'm Omar. I'm based also in Northwest Greater London. Currently, we have 2 serviced accommodation and fully operating in Swindon and in Oxfordshire. And that's since December last year.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so let's kind of jump in first with understanding. And sorry, Omar, you have stepped away from a job, haven't you?
That's correct. Yeah. So I used to work for the Red Cross, for the International Red Cross, and I was lucky enough to work and live in different parts of the world. I left that job last year. And since then, together with my wife, Sabrina, who couldn't be here today, unfortunately, we're fully focused on the property business. So yes, full-time, I've dived into property full-time.
Fantastic. Okay, so Omar, when sort of we met, I know that one of the things that I offer is I offer mentoring, but with a property thrown in. And that's because I'm very fortunate to have a landlord who really wants rent-to-rent serviced accommodation in his properties because he loves it. He loves the fact that it's kept in show home condition, and that it's a business. So it's not somebody who might squat in their property for 6 months or might not pay or might cause damage. So he's really keen on doing that. But at the same time, he wants to know that the people who move in have good knowledge and are able to sort of run a business. So that's where I come in. I love being able to help out to get that going. So that's how we basically were introduced, weren't we? You heard about what I was doing. But what at that point, because I know you'd already made that decision. So what made you move from an incredible international career in the Red Cross to suddenly thinking, you know what, I really want to now move into property?
Yeah, great. A great question. Yeah, it's not exactly the typical transferable skills that comes to mind, right? From the
Well, it's always transferable. Every skill is transferable.
Yeah, no, I mean, like I said, I was really lucky to have that career. I got married. We've got two beautiful children. Unfortunately, with my previous job, I ended up being away from home quite a lot. Even though, again, we were lucky enough to go on a couple of what they call a family mission, where my family was with me, but that's not always possible in the humanitarian world. But property, to be honest, I had been on my mind for, let's say, 3-4 years before. I started thinking about buying property, adding values to them, and then selling them in a greater condition. But due to different reasons, the economical situation, the interest rates, etc., service accommodation actually came to mind. I decided, because I think property, if done correctly, and eventually will mean that you can set up a business whereby you can decide when and how you spend your time with your loved ones, with your family. I know it's a bit of a cliche, but I'm starting to see that side of it, even though it's been only 4 months. Like, I'm grocery shopping, and then I get suddenly a message from the channel manager that you've received the booking, and all you have to do is just, tap in, and then that's it. So yeah.
Amazing. I absolutely love that. And that's why I do talk a little bit about what I've been doing with my family, because I just feel so incredibly fortunate. I mean, one, I think I'm unemployable now, so I don't think anyone would employ me, even if I wanted a job. But two, this morning, to be able to easily take my son to Gatwick, and I was out from 2 until 6, and then I was able to go back to bed for a couple of hours to sort of catch up and be ready for the day. And then I knew that I'm really busy this afternoon, so this morning I took Rosabella out for a ride on her little pony. And that I just love, and I love having that flexibility of being able to work evenings or mornings or catch a time here, there and everywhere that suits us and how we do it. And as you say, walking around the grocery shop and getting a ping to say you've just had a £400 booking or £1,000 booking or whatever it is quite nice. You think, yeah, I'll go and pay for the groceries now then. So yeah, I really love that. And I think having that why is incredibly important. And it would seem that it has brought it to you, hasn't it? That spending time away from your family or whatever that is we only get certain times, especially with your kids. You only get a certain amount of time. As I say, I just took one of mine off to, to abroad. He's flown the nest. I've got to go and muck out his bedroom, but other than that, it's all good and all exciting. Amazing. Okay, so Miran, what was it so you had already, you're only in your late 20s. You've done an incredible job. You've already bought a buy to let. I know that you have got some savings as well, or some funds there. But what made you kind of look at that kind of rent-to-rent serviced accommodation side of things?
So personally, for me, there are so many property strategies out there that you can pick from. The reason I chose this one was because I truly believe I will enjoy it the most. I love the concept of serviced accommodation. And wanting to create unique stays for guests. To me, that's appealing. And B, already having invested in buy-to-let, it utilizes a lot of capital. Capital that can be used elsewhere. Like a rent-to-rent that you can multiply and generate a lot more income from. And I guess overall, why property? Personally, it's being able to control how I spend my time. Both of you have said, you can go about and do whatever it is that you want. That's why property appeals to me overall. How I spend my time and how much money I earn. The effort that I put in, you know, there's going to be a reward at the end.
Absolutely. No, I love that. And it does seem to come out a lot, doesn't it? Time. It's such an important thing. And it is what the one thing that we can't get back, isn't it? We can lose all the money in the world, but we can get it back. But time, once it's gone, that's it. And in fact, I was listening to a book the other day, and it talks about Einstein time. I don't know if anyone's heard of that. That's quite clever. All about not letting the time go. You hear a lot of people, don't you, saying, oh, I haven't got time for that. I haven't got time for that. And we just let this time go. Whereas what we are doing here is working out what we can do to ensure that we have our own time and we're utilizing property to do that. And as you've very correctly said, Miran, that with rent-to-rent serviced accommodation, you actually don't need very much capital to start up. So yeah, and I think I remember rightly, Miran, that when we very first started, we really went through your kind of goals, where you wanted to be, and whether sort of rent-to-rent SA was really for you. Can you kind of remember those conversations that we had?
I certainly do. Yeah, I still remember you asking, what is my why? We started off with that, you know, and I really had to sit down and think about, you know, what's my why? It has to be strong enough for you to actually do this. You know, you have to believe that you can achieve it in order for you to actually do it. So yeah, we went through the goals, and my goal is, you know, to leave my corporate career, and essentially just spending my time wisely. You know, not having to wait until the never-ending retirement age, for example. You know, that doesn't appeal to me at all. So something like property, something like rent to rent, it's down my street. You know, that's exactly what I want to do. And you know, rent to rent isn't the end all. You know, for me personally, it's something that I think I can achieve. You know, and then I'll probably move on to a different strategy that, you know, you know, you're not going to be constantly doing the same thing over and over again. Rent to rent isn't the end all. So that's for me personally.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm a huge fan. Like, people say to me, why haven't you carried on building up a bigger and a bigger rent to rent? Well, for me, rent to rent was purely a cash flow process for me to then move on to other things. You know, my aim is to own property, you know, and that's what it's rent to rent enabled me to do. And I loved it, and I enjoyed it, but it wasn't I didn't want to have a hospitality business forever. It was my stepping stone. And some people, that's, you know, they're sort of uncertain about that. But one thing I just wanted to really stick with you, Miran, on that is, I remember those kind of first conversations, and you kind of had these ideas, but you had this kind of almost hope in this hand, and kind of, you know, that you knew that there was property in this hand, but you just couldn't quite mix them together. You were thinking, is this really possible? And I remember we did a little exercise, and I asked you, you know, what, for instance, what income would make you financially free? You know, what income would do that for you? And then I asked you, what would that kind of day look like? So you wake up that morning and you've got this money coming in. You're not having to do too much. Obviously, you're going to do a bit because it's your business, but let's say 2 to 3 hours a week or whatever it is. How would you feel? And that was quite a challenge for a bit, wasn't it, for you? Do you want to can you remember sort of talking through that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a challenge, and like I said before, you know, I really had to sit down and think about it, because if you're so used to the mindset of, you know, I'm going to be doing a 9 to 5 forever, I'm going to be working at this corporate job forever, you really have to think about what your life could look like if you chose to do something else. And for me, you know, it was waking up and not having to worry about, you know, attending a meeting, for example, or, you know, ready to start work at, you know, a certain time. So for me, you know, it's utilizing your time wisely, you know, and I feel like, you know, a 9 to 5 job doesn't really attract me anymore, whereas property does. So, you know, in our initial meetings, we definitely had to drill down on my why, my mindset. And I think you also prepared me for, you know, potential obstacles along the way. And I really needed to hear that, because personally, I think, you know, if you do anything in life, you have to be someone that's self-sufficient. You know, no matter how many no's you get, you have to pick yourself up and keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really loved it, because for me watching you, you know, obviously it's really rewarding for me to see things, but you felt a little bit lost when we first started chatting.
Definitely.
Totally normal.
Yep.
And I was able to give you a reason to take this path. And I think sometimes, like always, we have a thought that we might go in a certain way, but you weren't quite sure of that reason. Whereas for Omar, you know, his was really clear right from the start. And I'm sure, like all things, there are other elements that come into that. But when you have a family, that generally comes pretty high up on your radar. But, you know, for somebody who's in their late 20s, you know, who seemingly has what I would call quite a comfortable life. You're pretty comfortable, aren't you? You don't desperately hate what you're doing. It's, you know, and actually it's those people that it's the most difficult for. You know, for people who perhaps are really short of funds, you've got quite a motivation, haven't you? For those people who've got, you know, kids who are relying on you, that's a big motivation. You might have, you know, other things, but when we're a bit comfortable, that's actually the most difficult to get through, because we can just drop back so easy. Oh, I don't need to do that. I'm really comfortable. So I think for you, Miran, that was really, really an important part of understanding that and kind of, and moving forward. So yeah, really,
Absolutely.
really interesting. Yeah. So Omar, just going back to this rent to rent, because obviously with Miran and I, we kind of went through all the different strategies together, and he, you know, definitely wanted to go ahead with the rent to rent. But kind of when we met, you'd already made that decision on the strategy. So what was it that made you, for instance, do that and not deal sourcing, or perhaps rent to rent HMOs or something like that?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So as I mentioned earlier, I was looking at purchasing properties when I initially left my previous job, and I went as far as, you know, building that relationship with the agents, you know, go slow in order to go fast, as they say. So, you know, really investing genuine time with estate agents. I was looking at Watford, for example. I live very near to Uxbridge, so I was looking for properties within 40 to 30 minutes drive from where I live. And then obviously the interest rates started to spike. But I saw, from my own experience, I saw that wasn't really reflected in the property prices. So as an investor, it kind of made me slightly hesitant, you know, to invest in that strategy. So then the question of cash flow came in, and I wanted to get to the point where I'm able to replace. I was on a 6-figure salary, so I wouldn't say my salary right just yet, maybe in the near future, but at least our outgoings as a family living in London, to get that sort of outgoings that we have every month covered, and service accommodation came as a very good option. And I was lucky to have some education prior to meeting you, but I think with you also, it came at a very critical time, because I was sort of coming to an end on one sort of mentorship, and let's say as a graduate, or as somebody who was actually ready to take the property, which is what we did with you. And then, you know, the practical side came in. So, and as you've seen from my WhatsApp messages, especially when we're taking on the properties in Oxfordshire, it was really great to be able to kind of send those messages and say, oh, what do I do with this? What do I do with that? Because you can really learn a lot in theory, but it's when you actually get to the practical side, it's quite assuring, actually, and very helpful to have someone who's been there before and walk you through it. Yeah.
Amazing. And I think one thing with you, Omar, and I wonder if there's anything in you, but you are really focused. I mean, I love it. You are careful. You know, you're not going to just jump in and do anything rash or crazy, but you are very determined and you take a lot of action. And yeah, I've been really not amazed, that's the wrong kind of word, but really admiring of the way you do that. And as soon as you have an issue, you know where you can go and get answers. So for instance, you know, quite often it'll be me and it's like, this guest has just done this, and you've had a few challenging guests that we've worked through. And you know, but on top of that, so you started off with one property with me, but then you immediately went out, because obviously you want to grow a portfolio. So you very quickly were able to go and get another one. And I know you have been offered a few more since then. I know a couple haven't quite gone through, but is that your path? And, you know, was it helpful having, you know, I suppose somebody like me to help support you move forward like that?
Definitely. I think in terms of growth and focusing on service accommodation is definitely something that we're looking to do in the, I would say, next 5 years at least. I really want to get that portfolio extended, where hopefully we will have maybe 8 to 10 properties where we running as service accommodation. And one of the other reasons I forgot to mention is that with my previous job, I used to travel quite a lot. And between my long weekends and R&Rs, as they call it, we used to, go on holidays. And I used to quite like actually just getting Airbnb, especially traveling out Europe, because that's one of the ways you can actually get to get to meet the local people. So I was staying in their Airbnbs and stuff. And I experienced that for over 10 years, how as a guest, as somebody from the other side, from the other perspective, how this can actually help your journey and you experience in a given country that you're in. So that's another reason for service accommodation. But yeah, definitely in terms of growth, service accommodation is something that we want to increase. But like yourself as well, I am eventually also planning to own properties. I really have a passion in buying properties that are really run down and do it up. Like our residential home that we bought a few years ago, we bought it as a project, and I have it on my Instagram page whereby I was a de facto project manager. So we actually went back to bricks and we extended it. We did a side return extension. So yeah, absolutely. And having somebody definitely helps. I think there's a lot of resources out there, but having somebody that has done it and they have a proven record and they're well known in the industry, but it just helps you avoid the costly mistakes that you could face.
Amazing. So just as a bit of an aside, how did you find your second property? Obviously your first one you found through me, so that was kind of,
So the second one, actually, I also decided to go with a sourcer. You said that I take actions and I'm determined. That's true. But actually, I did take my time, before actually getting to the practical side where I started to take properties in our portfolio. I did think over it quite some time because I'm careful. I feel a bit responsible because I've got 2 kids and we've got a family, and I worked really hard for for the savings that I've had. So I didn't want to just go blindly into something and just maybe, so I took my time. But then, the second property we found through a sourcer that I actually got to know quite well. And she was amazing. We found this property. But like you said, since then, from the conversations that we've been having with friends, with kids' parents at school, like a lot of people actually are coming forward. I had a builder who found out about the property that I took in Oxford there, and he came forward and he said his sister has a place in Twickenham, and then we got into conversation where I was going to take that property on, but she postponed that for another 6 months, and so hopefully in a few months' time, that's one more property that we're going to add to our portfolio. So yeah, it's about having that conversation, talking to people about what you do, because you never know, one person talks to another person, and then that's also one way to find properties and work with landlords.
Amazing. Yeah, absolutely. And another thing, it would be, quite interesting to touch on, because I know that a lot of people starting out, and I was exactly the same, you will have the odd very awkward tenant as a guest. And Omar had one quite early on, didn't you? I think it was literally one of your very first clients in the Swindon one, wasn't it?
Yeah, correct.
You want to just give a little bit of background? And
yeah, without giving it, sorry, yeah, without giving it too much. But yeah, it was, I think, the very second or third guest we had since we took the property. And I think there was a few points that they gave us a feedback, and I really welcomed that, and I was really grateful. We were appreciating it. Emma was always in the loop because I kept Emma updated. But it kind of started turning a little bit, I would say, unfriendly, and also with the wrong motive. You know, one of those guests whereby they keep coming to you with issues. Some of them are genuine, some of them are not so. And then you realize it's not really that they want an improvement or they want something changed. They start throwing that word, you know, reimbursement. When you start questioning their motives, you know, it's like, okay, is this the reason that you really want to get some money back? How genuine is this? And then it's a matter of trying to kind of also act professionally while being firm, but also you don't not let someone take advantage of, you know, the fact that you're running this as a business. But it was great to kind of exchange with Emma on this one.
But just to sort of jump in there, like just to imagine, because I felt having been there before, I felt your pain. So it was quite a long booking, wasn't it? Was it nearly a month's booking?
It was a month's booking, yeah. So it was a month's booking. They came through Airbnb, and
yeah. Pretty much, if I just remember it, so it was like a month's booking. They came in, they made a few complaints. I think there was something wasn't working, and there was something in the oven that could have been cleaner. But, you know, as this can happen to all of us, you immediately jumped on it, and, you know, you were doing exactly the right thing. It was all really fine. But then again, they started threatening, basically, didn't he? In an indirect way, that he wanted his money back. And of course, when you're new into serviced accommodation, you think you're sitting there looking at the money that's coming in, because obviously it's a rent to rent, and you also need to pay your rent and your bills and all of those things, and you'd like to make some money.
Absolutely.
And so you felt quite under pressure. And yeah, I felt really happy to be able to give you that support to say, you know what, you have offered a really good service. You know, yes, there was a couple of things that were, you know, not up to what he wanted, but they were still fine. And you immediately went and rectified them, but he was still carrying on. And I think you had, if I'm right, a conversation which basically said something along the lines of, you know, I've heard you. I've done absolutely everything that you wanted me to do very quickly. But if my standards are not good enough for you, you're more than willing to go and find a property elsewhere. And he already had a pretty good deal with you, didn't he? And then kind of what happened there, because suddenly you, rather than being in the seat where you were kind of like, oh, I'll help you, you know, I'll do everything, which is what we feel like sometimes. It's like, I don't want to lose a month's booking. You suddenly turned it around to just being very professional, very businesslike, and you're not going to be messed around by somebody who's just trying to get some more money off. So how did that feel, kind of turning that on its head?
Yeah, it felt great, actually. At some point I was thinking, well, if this is the actual nature of service accommodation, is this going to be this much of a stress? So, I mean, I'm an ex-humanitarian. I was in a conflict zone. And I was like, okay, this is not exactly this is not exactly beach and cocktails, right? But I think one thing that really works in our favor, and that's again thanks to my previous knowledge, but also thanks to really your hands-on support, was to act immediately. And I think to keep open communication, because actually when they left the review at the end, one of the positive points that they left in the review was the communication was always open and prompt. And this is something that it's really important value for myself, you know, with the guest communication. But it was, if you look at the text messages and the messages that have been sent, if you look at the first half, the nature of them is extremely like unfriendly. They weren't like abusive or anything, but just a bit, you know, hostile. But then since that conversation, the ultimate conversation we had, it was like, look, this is what we've done. everything that you've raised, like at 9 p.m. in the evening, they raised something. And then the following day, on a Saturday at 9 in the morning, I send the cleaners again. So that's, I mean, you can't really beat that, right? And I said, look, we've done everything that you've raised. We've tried to provide a good service to you. But as you said, Emma, if this is not enough for you, I actually said, look, maybe from next week, we can end this reservation and you could probably find somewhere else. And then from then on, and actually, I even suggested, look, I said, if the conversation is not very helpful, I can actually come and see you at the property. And I think that's also another psychological thing, like, right? So, I mean, not that I was I was going to do anything, just to see face to face, to see what the problems are, and a better face to face communication. And then it's just switched 360 degrees, and he said, no, it's okay. We're very happy. And then at the end, the review wasn't actually that bad as well.
I think didn't he give you a 7? Was it a 7 he gave you?
So it's a 3 out of 5 on Airbnb, but also the comment itself was quite good. So it wasn't like, it's also about preempting these things, right? So you kind of have that communication with the guest. But yeah, that was an interesting experience.
Yeah. So yeah, and it's lovely to see that, because also, I've had, people take the mickey before. They've come in and they've said, oh, this place is disgusting, it's filthy, and it's like, well, I walked out of there half an hour ago and it certainly wasn't filthy and disgusting. Oh, and it stinks, they say. And quite often you do have to kind of turn it back on them. And I will say, well, I'm so sorry if my standards aren't high enough for you. I'm more than happy for you I'll give you a refund right now for today, and you can go away. And then they're a bit like, oh no, well, and some people just, there are people that take the mickey. There are lots who are absolutely lovely. I had some extended contractors the last couple of weeks, and honestly, he couldn't have been nicer. I'd call out, is everything okay? Oh yes, love, it's absolutely lovely. We love it.
Yeah.
All of this, and so it's great. So let's go back to Miran. So Miran has chosen to go on his own to find his properties. And one of the things that is really key, and I did the same. So when I started out, I went out and found my properties. I walked the streets, a bit like what Miran is doing right now. But one of the things that I know was probably slightly frustrating initially was how much I pushed you to find your goldmine area. If anyone doesn't know, I do have a completely free like a leaflet which tells you exactly what to do to find your goldmine area. And to me, it's one of the most important things. So Miran, I wonder if you could sort of just give us a bit of feedback, how you kind of felt before I kind of really pushed you to do that goldmine area, and how you feel now, having done all this comparison of multiple places. I'd be really interested if you kind of give us that kind of walkthrough of that journey, I suppose. No, we can't hear you now.
Can you hear me now?
I know you went off for a second. Yes, we can.
Perfect. Yeah, so you did push me quite hard to make sure that I was doing my due diligence, making sure that the goldmine area that I selected, or multiple areas that that were potential, were correct. I had to do a vast amount of due diligence to make sure that once.
Can I just add in there, when Miran says that I pushed him, Miran is the most committed. He works incredibly hard. So this is not, I was asking him to just get things done. No. I was just making sure that we went down a rabbit hole, and we kept going until we got to the bottom of that rabbit hole. So it's not that he wasn't doing a lot of work. He really works very hard.
Yeah, absolutely. The way, I think before I started, I thought, okay, this area might work as a goldmine area, but I didn't have anything to back it up, which is a massive oversight. If I were to have an essay in that area, it wouldn't have worked. There are multiple areas where I researched, I thought maybe this area might work, and it just didn't. The figures didn't stack up. So a massive amount of due diligence had to be done to make sure that the figures stacked up in terms of, you know, the nightly rates were high enough, the type of property, for example, companies in the area, you know, corporate companies might play a massive part in your Airbnb if you market it correctly. Construction sites, I went around the area to, you know, I just drove around just to find out what's going on in the area. So that's a massive thing. So yeah, the more due diligence you do, the more confident you are going to be in that area. You know, you've selected area, and now you're confident that you can make this work. So that's how it felt for me. You know, I feel confident that this area is going to work. I spoke to people at construction sites, and I found out what their issues were, for example. You know, and that gave me hope. That gave me faith that, you know, I can resolve their issues. You know, people, you know, contractors staying in hotels. For me, that was a massive one. You know, I found out that they don't like staying in hotels. You know, they're confined to this one room without any of their other colleagues, you know, perhaps on different floors or different rooms, for example. You know, having an Airbnb or serviced accommodation would fit their needs perfectly. And finding that out, you know, that's a massive achievement.
How did you find, because I always push really hard for people to compare areas,
Yes.
because I know most of us go, oh, well, I don't know, you know, Cambridge, that's going to be a great area. It's got all of these things, or, you know, but it is an hour and a half away, or I should go in the north, or I should go here because I think it's going to be okay. What did you find when you did actually do, by me going, you've got to keep comparing, and I think we did end up, you know, with your gold mine area still being the one that we'd initially looked at, didn't we? But how did you find actually comparing multiple areas? What did that kind of give to your due diligence?
It did multiple things. You know, one of them being it allowed me to see which area would stack up well. So you could have an area, you know, area 1 has a rent of £2,000, but you only receive £150 a night, whereas area 2 might have a rental of £1,400 a night, £1,500 a night, but you get £160 a night, you know? So it allows you to compare the figures. It allows you to compare what's going on in the area, you know, seeing how seasonal areas are. I instantly, you know, I could see from doing my analysis of areas how seasonal a particular area is, you know. That's one of the things. And I guess saturation is another thing. You know, I did a lot of research to find out how saturated an area is, you know, how many people are doing the same thing, and are they bringing, you know, one person could bring their average nightly rate completely down to undercut other people, you know. So I was finding things like that out. Yeah,
I love it. I love it. It's really powerful, isn't it, basically? And I know, Omar, we've done the same. I know, Omar, I'm a big fan of kind of sticking to one area and, you know, gaining economies of scale and those kind of things. And also, the main reason I also do it is, and we'll touch on that in a moment, when you actually get on the ground and start looking for properties, it's not easy. You know, it's really not that easy. And if you think that that area also might be good and that area might be good, you suddenly go on your, you know, day 1, day 2 on the field, visiting the agents, and they say you get a lot of no's, and then you suddenly think, oh, I don't think I'm going to stick to this area anymore. I'm going to go over here. And it's a bit like that analogy, isn't it? Which I love, where there's a vein of gold in the ground and somebody's bashing away and they've built this big they've dug a big hole and they're millimeters away from the gold vein. And they've done all this work and then they decide to get out and go somewhere else and start digging another hole. So you never actually hit that gold. Now, I know for a fact that Miran is millimeters away from that gold vein, and that's because he's now going you know, into the hardcore part of actually meeting people. So another thing, Miriam, so you're actually now, you chose that goldmine area. You feel really confident. You've got a huge amount, haven't you, of due diligence. So if ever you were to go, oh, I'm not sure this is going to work, you can just go back to your spreadsheets, all that work that you've done, and go, look, this is why I'm still here, and this is why I'm doing it, and I know I'll be able to find it. But an interesting one, I hope you don't mind me sharing this, but you did one day in the field, so to speak. So you were walking the path in your goldmine area, and you met up with 6 letting agents. And I think I'm right in remembering 3 of them were quite friendly, and 3 of them were really not that friendly, were they? Quite unpleasant. And letting agents can be pretty unpleasant. It was also raining, and it was a challenge, wasn't it? So can you remember the beginning of that day? Because I think your very first one was awful, and it was just the perfect scenario. You sent me a message saying they've told me that that day has gone. There are no serviced accommodation. No landlord will allow it. And yeah, you messaged me, didn't you? How were you feeling at that point? Because it is understandable. You've done all this hard work. You've gone out on the field. You're really excited. And then you walked in, and then how did you feel?
Yeah, I was quite unfortunate that my very first letting agent I spoke to, completely, shut it down. Not only just shut it down, but said it's never going to work.
That's
the thing
quite harsh.
It's quite harsh. But it's how you bounce back from that. I did message you, but the next thing I did was go to the next one, next agent, and did the same thing. You are going to get a lot of no's, and as long as you're prepared for those no's and how you understand how you're going to deal with those no's, that's the main thing. Because I kept going. Initially it was very frightening. I went completely outside of my comfort zone, to go in an estate agent full of people staring at you and pitching what you're proposing. You're proposing an idea that you believe is going to work in that area. And I guess this is where being self-sufficient comes in place, because I just kept reminding myself that no, I've done my due diligence. This is going to work. I know. Realistically, I probably know more than that agent knew. That letting agent knew, because of my due diligence. So I was confident, but you have to be prepared for those no's. And I hope you don't mind me saying, a great book is Go for No. I've learned so much from that book, because it's just about how you deal with those no's, and gamifying those no's. For example, let's get some more no's, because the more no's you get, the closer you are to that yes. And I really like that.
Yeah. And what is really key for me is I like to kind of minimize as much as possible the enormity of the job ahead. And you'd done your entire due diligence, and part of that was exactly as you said. You were so confident that it would work in that area that you were able to continue by just taking another step. And let's be fair, the marathon is purely just another step, isn't it? And another step and another step. And you walked out, you felt pretty deflated, but it's like, I'm here, I've got my X number that I want to go and do. And so one of the things that, I think you'll agree is before that, we'd really prepared on the mindset, hadn't we? Is really preparing you that this is likely to happen. Read Go for No. I like having just a sheet of paper, and we have 10 circles on it, and you have no inside, and each person that says no, you just cross it off, and you do a little yes dance, because I'm one step nearer to a yes. And just little things like that can make all the difference, because what you were actually doing wasn't difficult. It's not difficult to walk in a letting agent and to say hello and have a conversation. That is not difficult, but it feels quite challenging. And as you say, they all tend to be looking at the front, and they're all looking at you. So we worked really hard on your mindset, which really helped. But also on top of that, I like to help people feel more professional. So do you want to share a little bit about how you were able to feel a little bit more professional going into those letting agents?
Yeah, so it's really funny because so I didn't really think about this initially, but going into a letting agent, you want to present yourself in the best possible way. One of the ways was, of course, dressing nicely, but two, it was, having a flyer of, outlining exactly what you do, so they can look back at it once you're not there. And I found that really important. And I even received compliments from some letting agents saying, this looks very professional. It's very different to other people that might have pitched the same thing or gone into the letting agent to pitch the same thing. So, having a flyer, having a business card, for me personally, that made me more comfortable. Um, and it was nice to get some sort of appreciation from the letting agents, and they can keep in touch with me. I always took their business card as well, so I can keep in touch with them. So it's yeah, I personally think those are the most important things when going to a letting agent, and being as natural as possible when you're trying to pitch something. Don't I know, don't follow a script, for example. I know that's very controversial, but for me, it was saying something as natural as possible, um, and just being yourself, because that's who you are at the end of the day.
Absolutely. But also you'd done, as you said, you knew so much by that point. You'd done so much due diligence. You felt really confident. And what I loved about that day is you literally went from, really having the rug pulled from under your feet in the first letting agent who was basically just mean and not saying the truth, but saying their truth. That was fine, but it's not your truth. To then much, as the day progressed, you literally had people saying, wow, you're one of the most professional people we've had round. And let's be fair, you're a young chap as well. So that can be a bit intimidating. But you came out of that day, and would you say, in fairness, that you felt on quite a high at the end of that day?
Absolutely, yeah, and it allowed me to go back the next week and speak to 13 or 15 agents, and I knew what to do this time. Um, and I feel like I've built some good relationships now with estate agents. Um, yeah, so I'm really glad I went out there, get out of my comfort zone for the first time, and then the second time, it came naturally.
And I think the final thing to sort of say on that is definitely after that second visit, you had a moment of feeling a little bit deflated. It was kind of like, I've had a few bites, but nothing's really carried on. And I was kind of able to sort of throw it back and say, well, how many people have you ever heard in the rent to rent sector who said, I just went to my area twice and I got my first rent to rent? It's very unlikely. So we have to understand that Miran is now at the stage where he's actually done all the really exciting bits. He's done loads of due diligence. He's found out all these exciting things. He's gone and met some letting agents, and that's, that was really outside of his comfort zone. So you're going to end up with a bit of a high. But now it's just a lot of repetition.
Absolutely.
It's a lot of, and we've now really gone into just KPIs, so key performance indicators on a daily basis. How many letting agents to call, how many properties to follow up on. And we've been looking, haven't we, about parts or elements that may be missing in your search for finding the next landlord or the next property. So how did you find this learning that we've been talking about, and then kind of applying it to your day to day, because you also work as well? So how have you found the sort of learning but then applying it to that day to day working?
Yeah, so I think the main thing is, I keep saying this, I keep banging on about this, but mindset. I think my mindset's completely improved since the beginning of the year. I feel like a completely different person, and most of it was from you, and two, it was reading various books about mindset, and I can apply what I've learned here to my day to day, my job. but I can't bang on enough. It's about mindset. It's all about mindset, believing that you can do it. You know, yeah.
Fantastic. No, I love that. I love that. So yeah, so Omar, as far as, oh, we keep losing you, Omar. Sorry about that.
I'm here. Sorry, the sun decided to come out, so I'm turning the shutters.
Oh, no worries, no worries. Yeah, so from you, you've kind of gone through this kind of whole process in kind of incorporating it. So this is really new for you. You've gone from a job, so to speak, to basically working on your own. Well, I know you've got your wife, but a family thing. So how have you found that kind of transition, and what have you been able to kind of put in place to be able to, you know, create a schedule of home working, I suppose?
Yeah, so luckily I mean, maybe luckily is not the right word, but we had COVID before that. So with my previous job, I actually ended up working from home, which kind of got me used to the working from home side of things. So that was quite helpful. But then, yeah, I think it goes back to motivation, you know, the why factor. You feel a sense of responsibility. I think there's also always going to be some sort of procrastination, motivation levels being different on each day of the week. But then you kind of start thinking about, okay, so what sort of life do I want to have? I don't know. Who's going to be, which Omar do I want to be in 5 years' time? You know, that cliche thing. And then what actions can I take right now to kind of work towards that Omar? And then I think it just goes with, building those small habits, starting very small, which I think can be useful in everything. And then, then practically actually learning a new skill, you know, like how to analyze a deal. I mean, it's not, I don't know if you want to call it a skill, but it's like still, you know, kind of you funnel a lot of things through a system, and you decide whether that such thing is a good thing for you or not, you know. But like Maren is doing with my previous strategy, I was also doing something similar. And what I found as well, that was like 1.5 years ago, to this day, from time to time, I receive calls from those agents who call me to say that, you know, there's a property coming up. Are you still looking? So even though my strategy was different, and at that time, I was getting exactly the same thing as Maren was getting. Sometimes maybe, you know, like you get somebody who's not very friendly, they've had a long day, they just want to get done with the viewing. But then you kind of spend a bit more time during that viewing, get to know them. And then if you can, eventually swap numbers and stuff. And then that's how you build that genuine relationship with the agent. So it's things like this as well that you might not see an immediate result, but then 6 months down the line, 1 year down the line, you get a call and say, oh, we've got a property that might be suitable for you. Are you still looking? Would you be interested? So I don't know whether that answers your question, but I think it's a variety of things like these.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And in fact, one of my most favorite things, and I know Maren has been saying it a lot, is as soon as they say something like no or negative, I always respond in, oh, that's interesting. Why is that? So they might say, oh, no, we don't do corporate lets. Oh, that's interesting. Why is that? Oh, no, we've had terrible issues with corporate lets. Oh, that's interesting. Why is that? And quite often, you know, it may be that you get down to the level that they just, you know, they're a national brand and they just don't do corporate lets, and that's perfectly fine. But more often than not, if you're going to the smaller ones, they may have had an incident with a corporate let. But I know one of the ones that I had, it was actually a charity, and they had genuinely trashed the place. And once they found out that actually I was running something that's like a hotel, and it has to be in hotel quality condition, and that I have ring cameras, and that I take my own personal deposits, and that I do all of these checks, they're a bit like, oh, well, that is quite interesting. So it's kind of, I love that. So if anyone takes something away from today, that's a really great one. I always say, oh, that's interesting. Why is that? And I think that can really help along the way. So we've kind of spoken about, you know, your journey and coming along here. But one thing that I'm always really interested in finding out in the way people learn as well. So one of the things that we do is, obviously, you guys, we have one-to-ones, one-on-ones. You have access to me on WhatsApp. But then what we also do, don't we, is I have a subscription group, and we all meet 2 to 4 times a month, and there's a group of us, and we're able to talk through what we're doing, how that's happening. And I know you both are real fans of both sides of it, so I'd love to kind of hear from you what it is that you get from kind of the individual, but also on the group side. So Miran, can I throw that question at you?
Yeah, sure. So the first thing that springs to mind is you get to hear about what other people are doing. You know, whether that's different strategy or along a different, you know, they're ahead of you. For example, you know, they've already got 2 rent-to-rent essays. You know, and you get to learn quite a lot. And there are a lot of questions, a lot of tips that you share that are helpful. You know, that will help me eventually once I do get the essay. So yeah, I find them really useful. Just finding out what people are up to, I guess. You know.
Fantastic, I love that. And Omar, how about yourself?
Yeah, similar actually. I think it's when you're in a group as well, like it's those different questions from the same. It's amazing how you look at the same issue, but five different people might have 5 different questions. So I think having groups like this, and also as Miran said, so we are at different stages of our journey. It's just that because we started at different times. So when you share an issue, or when you read somebody else's issue that they're facing, it's just a different perspectives. And of course, I mean, having somebody like Emma as well, then you can say, well, yeah, I've come across this. And then somebody might look at it differently. I think one-to-ones, you get, I like it a lot because you really get to choose a very bespoke, something which is really related to your situation. So really focus on what you're doing and then pick that as a subject and then really take a deep dive. And I think depending on the issue and the situation you face, both of them could be useful, I think, in their own ways.
Yeah, I love that. And for me, you know, I did a lot of training through masterminding. And if anyone follows Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, that's a huge element of masterminding. And you do see that. I mean, I'm sure even with your, you know, business partner or even with your friends, you can sit down, can't you? And you've been sort of thinking about something. And when you start sharing it and everyone else starts talking about it, it's not double. It's literally like multiplied so much, the kind of the way you can sort of go forward. So I love the whole kind of masterminding. And also each kind of individual will have an issue which crops up. And exactly as you've said, I'm not just the only one who has knowledge. We've all got what I call just, you know, life experience. And that can really help us. And seeing, for instance, how Omar dealt with a challenging client, and seeing how Miran dealt with, you know, the very first letting agent that he spoke to, absolutely pulling the rug from under him, enables other people to go, okay, that's really interesting. I wonder how I would react in that way. And it's just a really kind of lovely way of sort of looking at it. And I do think there's, I mean, I still do masterminding. I mastermind as a business. I mastermind with other, you know, people who also do mentoring. I mastermind with, obviously, with property people. I absolutely love it. And every time I come away, there's 2 big things. One, I'm sat all day looking at my business and I'm not in my business. So if nothing else, even when I have meetings and things like that, I make sure that is a massive priority, and I never miss them. I'm one of the only people that never miss them, because I see it as being really, really important. And then secondly, the kind of things that we've touched on here is seeing what other people do. I love to be, you know, the the least experienced or the least successful person in the room, because guess what? They really push you and grow you. So it's an incredible thing to do. Well, look, guys, this has been so interesting. I really love, and I hope this has helped other people, because I know for me, I actually followed somebody really closely who was just ahead of me when I very first started. And it gave me such inspiration knowing those things, like, you know, Miran has said, where I'd had no's, and where this had gone wrong and that had gone wrong, and I didn't really know, you know, which sofa to use. All of these things were just so great to have somebody who is, you know, just that little bit ahead of you. So, okay, so I want to have a bit of a closing statement from you guys. Just a bit of a kind of a confirmation of where you want to go in the next month or so. I know we're coming to the end of this first quarter, so where would you like to see yourself? And then you can put it out to the universe, and we'll be able to come back and see how we're doing along the way. So Miran, do you want to kick off with that?
I think you already know. It's perhaps securing my first or second rent-to-rent essay.
I love it. I love it.
Which is very
Omar,
much
how about
achievable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, yes. So we are looking to increase our portfolio as well. We're looking at another 2 to be added as soon as possible, and that's that's something that I'm looking forward to being busy with.
Brilliant. Well, look, guys, I really, really appreciate you sharing your time here today with us. I wish you all the you know, success in the world, and I'm very honoured that I'm here to help you along the way as well. So yeah, absolutely. So I will, I believe, be back next week. I know we're in half term, but I missed a couple because of kids stuff. So I think I am doing this again next week. So I look forward to seeing you all then. And again, thank you so much, Omar and Miran. Take care.
Thank you, Emma.
Thank you so much, Emma.